Welcome back, WoW friends and critics. This is Soul with another episode of Warcraft Weekly, the show that fills you in on what is up in Warcraft in the least exciting way possible. Woo! Season 4 of Battle for Azeroth has begun, unleashing the remainder of patch 8.3 content.
Talk about the cinematic.
Including the opening of the Nyaloth raid, the new PvP and Mythic Plus season,
But the ending cinematic.
updates to some of the bugs and issues that plagued the start of 8.3.
Dude, did you see the cinematic?
Just shut the fuck up, man.
See, I bring the excitement.
Before we get started, let's run the ticker of awesome people who let me keep preaching the good word of WoW to you, including the return of Kenneth and newcomers Tim and Albert. Thanks a ton to all of you, and if you're up for helping our fun little community grow and thrive, consider becoming a patron.
Now can we talk about...
Yes. We're going to talk about the ending cinematic. If you're scared of spoilers, I am sorry, but I am going to play the post-raid cinematic. But to be perfectly honest, there is not much to spoil. The cinematic plays after an initial cutscene where basically your character completes the plan to unleash the destructive powers of origination onto the core of N'Zoth. In short, we win. Woo! And Lavos N'Zoth is smited, and with the Old God's defeat, Nyalotha, which is presumably a construct of the Old God's vision in the first place, crumbles to dust. We're then taken back to the Chamber of Heart and the credits roll, and that's it. That's all the B-roll. How long have you been seeing my face? So what did this final cinematic turn out to be? There's all sorts of conclusions people have come up with, like Blizzard clearly abandoned BFA to work on Shadowlands. No, they rushed it because Activision told them to. This is just a big FU from the cinematic team. God, they were so bad in BFA. Not to mention the other references to older franchises that I guess somewhere in there, Blizzard is ripping off Lord of the Rings? Like, what? The reactions or overreactions to the cinematic make up the what of today's weekly. Yeah, it's been a while. Don't misunderstand me though, the cinematic itself is indefensible. All it takes really is a comparison to previous Final Raid cinematics to perform your own vicious and objective takedown of Blizzard's apparent lack of work on a cinematic that has in previous years capped the end of a final raid of an expansion. The crazy-ass theories and vitriol that people are spouting on the forums, and the enthusiasm in part of content creators like me to race to their cameras and react oh so strongly to said cinematic for so-called rage clicks, I'm like, what? And real quick, what are rage clicks? Well, that's the internet audience that's drawn to negative criticism, whether it's well-constructed or just a chain of memes and sounds. What sort of sucks is that this audience is that they tend to be toxic. What's great about this audience, though, is that they're extremely motivated to view content and are very engaging, expressing that engagement with upvotes, downvotes, comments, retweets, and etc. You gotta love them, right? As for me, though, and really I'm not that much different from you, I've been slacking off for a couple of days, but now I'm ready to give my own take of what the cinematic communicates to me as a player and a fan and a commentator. It's short. Don't worry, I'm gonna say more, okay? The engagements against N'Zoth have taken place all throughout Azeroth's history, from the Black Empire, to the usurping of Neltharion, to Ashara's rebirth, to attempting to undo the War of the Ancients, to the little bits of corruption that we've dealt with during World of Warcraft, from cultists, to Deathwing, to Xavius, to Il'gynoth, to manipulating Magni and Nazjatar, and somewhere in there's the knife thing, to finally N'Zoth's freedom and his subsequent takedown. When I joked that N'Zoth was going down in a single patch, it was the truth, but it was also a joke that makes light of the obvious. N'Zoth has been a recurring villain throughout Azeroth's history if you've been paying attention. To ignore that would be, a joke. What's harmful about this cinematic, though, is not that it wasn't a fitting end to a raid. Many raid bosses get less. In fact, I was expecting one for Jaina. It's kind of a bummer. One of the main gripes I have is that it wasn't a fitting end to a final raid that includes what this expansion was all about. Then again, what was this expansion about? We can look back at Battle for Azeroth and understand that its title had a nebulous meaning. But when we first saw that chest-beating cinematic, viewers understood this as
Battle for Azeroth, the expansion that puts us versus them, the faction war.
we're gonna put his head on a stick. Or like, no, we're gonna put her head on a stick.
No, sticks for everyone.
But then in patch 815, the story got a lot more crowded. Battle for Azeroth was no longer just about who can win Azeroth, but can Azeroth survive the looming threat of Ashara and the old god itself, N'Zoth. Now we have two big story arcs, and unfortunately for all of us, Blizzard didn't devote enough development time to make two of these rich and full experiences that could tell two complete stories. BFA was sort of like two expansions crammed into one. Now gameplay-wise, we got our content, we got raids and dungeons, PvP and Mythic Plus seasons, cosmetics that no one is going to universally agree with, and features to talk smack about. Story-wise though, that's for you to decide, but I'm coming away from this feeling like there was a lot of work put into the faction war. Meanwhile, there wasn't as much work put into the story that Blizzard wanted to resolve, the old gods. N'Zoth has been written as this wide-reaching villain because he's touched countless lives over its history. The Dragonflights, the Kaldorei, the Titan constructs, mortals, the list goes on. But there are very few characters who have a truly personal connection with N'Zoth, and that's what makes him a weak character, despite being so powerful that it takes a doomsday weapon to stop him. Legion had a cinematic to end the Nighthold, the Tomb of Sargeras, and Antorus the Burning Throne, because those encounters connected us to characters who had a strong connection to a villain that we're much more familiar with. N'Zoth's only good connection was to Ashara, which by comparison isn't quite as filling or interesting. Would a full Old God expansion have worked out better to create build-up? Probably. But I speculate that you can thank the same people who cried over the Kung Fu Panda expansion, or the Orc expansion, or the Green expansion. You can thank them for being loud enough to discourage Blizzard from creating the Tentacle expansion. And they basically communicated to Blizzard that they shouldn't stay stuck on the same theme for very long. Thanks. With that in mind though, here's some headcanon, okay? Here's some made up stuff, it's fan fiction, right? I think that if we took the story elements of patch 825, which was like the almost siege of Orgrimmar, and then we moved that onto a patch 835, we would have a much more satisfying conclusion to BFA, wouldn't we? We'd have this fitting end to the expansion that began at dawn and ended as the sun set. Imagine the end of the faction war, or at least the temporary smothering of the faction war in this explosive cinematic, followed by an epilogue that depicts a somber end, a glimmer of hope for the future, and the foreshadow of what's to come. If N'Zoth was beat back before these events took place, then this would be the final cinematic. It wouldn't be a post-raid cinematic, but it would be this dramatic conclusion to the Sylvanas and Saurfang beef in full HD eye sex that would lead us straight to the footsteps of Icecrown Citadel. Instead, it was like, oh crap, N'Zoth, yeah, that's right, this is what we got instead. And then we got a spattering of post-war epilogue to go with it. And Azeroth still has a sword in its sandy butt. Some could speculate that this really is what was planned originally, but something mucked it all up, like cancelled content, or the Azerite Essence system getting in the way, or Bobby Kotick. There's all sorts of possibilities. We can get into that and react to our headcanon and imagination. We can make up reasons to be angry at Blizzard and get mad, Or we can just not give a shit, because we're way past that. So in case your takeaway from this is something, souls being a shell, whatever, let me make this clear. Battle for Azeroth was two stories, the faction war and the threat of N'Zoth, which are stories that probably could be expansions onto themselves. Blizzard tried to tell too much and ended up telling too little. So the mail works now.
Wait, what?
Boom! Ha! How do you like that masterful transition, huh? Shortly into 8.3's launch, and with it the revamped auction interface, the systems that govern auctions sold were busted, leading to millions of gold being held in limbo as Blizzard scrambled to make a fix. Speaking personally, it was kind of a humorous phenomena to see the proceeds of a shirt in my mailbox, and that was it. But the other day the mail began returning as promised. Of course, there's no telling if all the mail has been recovered, so we'll see who tries to make a claim that, yeah, I definitely sold 70 spectral tigers over the past week.
It was 40 tigers, actually.
Of course, that's not all. Reports of numerous bugs continue to come in, and notably, over on the EU side, the Darkshore Warfront suddenly opened up for the Horde, well before its scheduled time. This may have a small effect on the World First race, which starts next week. Top guilds have been hard at work, squeezing out every bit of performance that they can, farming for neck levels and corrupted gear from anywhere they could find it. The effects of corrupted gear have definitely reared their ugly head by now, and Blizzard has responded. Many corruption effects were based on player stats, aka item level, meaning that even blues that happen to have a strong corruption effect could be as powerful or more powerful as raid gear. This has now been changed to scale against the specific item's item level, making the effect much more consistent. Super overpowered procs like Infinite Stars have been nerfed severely, but not before players were decking themselves out in World Quest blues, as long as they were packed with these powerful effects. So maybe the World First race isn't going to be a screen full of Infinite Stars raining death upon Nyalotha. Maybe like half the screen. It's not all nervous gloom and doom this week though. A very welcome change came to daily content in 8.3. Rewards from daily quests got a huge buff to encourage players to hop in and knock out those blue little exclamation marks.
Well, that kind of sucks.
Oh, here we go.
Because now it's a good idea to do every daily, otherwise we'd fall behind.
You know, you could always just keep doing the routine that you want to do. No one's forcing you.
Yeah, they are.
And there are bound to be additional changes over the coming days as we begin this final competitive race for World First. The dust is still settling, but this is it, folks. This is the beginning of the end of Battle for Azeroth. And it feels kind of awkward. I'm going to give some personal observations. You more than likely won't agree with me, but just hear me out. But corrupted gear has really changed the atmosphere of the game for me. It seems goofy for me to wander around the land doing like world quests and warfronts for easy to farm corrupted gear. It doesn't sound like this is what WoW should be, when a certain corruption bonus obliterates the sense of consistency that item level used to communicate. And yet, I find this to be so much more exciting and fun than Titan Forging or having nothing. Because before it just felt so boring and linear, which is not bad, it just doesn't fit so well for me. It was one thing to hope for a max Titan Forged whatever the heck because, it's going to be the best item ever. It's another thing altogether to find a ring with high corruption. It's not as simple as, oh, I just put it on and I'm going to do better. This is going to sound weird and probably cringy, but bear with me, all right? Let me shift in my seat and get ready for this. But take a look at this ring over here. It's not just a regular ring that I got off a world quest. In my head, it's
a cursed ring, filled with the incredible power of raining black death upon my enemies, but it comes at the cost of dancing with destruction. Only when I face hordes of sort of weaker enemies am I gonna wear this ring and cut through them like fresh flan, knowing that at any time I might be afflicted with a pain that I bear alone.
Or the healers keep me up, right? Thanks. Or take my warrior over here, my poor warrior and his terrible transmog, fresh out of the Horde Academy, caught up in this stupid war and armed with whack-ass gear. He's struggling to hold his own against the old gods encroaching upon his home. But then one day he chances on this amazing, explosively powerful gear that could propel him to the upper echelons of his counterparts. But his lack of experience and other equipment would make wearing these irresponsible, to say the least, or a ticking time bomb at worst. So should he wear these, knowing the obvious risks? Many pundits on the forums and theory crafters, math people, and top players have railed against the idea of corruption from the beginning, and for very convincing reasons. As a commentator myself, I've described this as RNG anarchy, and I've questioned what this is going to mean for the game. But when I turn that switch off, and I just become a player of the game, I'm finding that corruption is so interesting that my concerns just go out the window. I'm just excited to get more stuff. As a player, just a player, there's so much that I can mess with to create a synergy. It's not unlike messing with tier pieces or trinkets, talents, secondary stats, Azerite traits, essences, legendary gear. Corruption is a throwback to balancing hit and expertise and defense rating, and I found those stats to be very fun. Now, maybe I drank too much of that Blizzard Kool-Aid. Those pundits and top players would have you buy into their way of thinking, but they're not you, and neither am I. I just encourage you to decide for yourself. And let's wrap it up. I know today's production was a little bit light. I don't even have a Bob gag, but I've been busy with RL stuff in the background. I'm actually going to go out of town starting today, actually. I'm going to be doing house sitting, so my next couple of videos are going to be a bit less pretty, if this is pretty, but you know.
But you'll get plenty of B.
Yeah, we'll get plenty of Bob.
All up in your face.
You know, okay, that's really close.
Sexually.
Great, that's great. You don't even have sex organs.
I don't. Oh no.
Lately, I've been a bit more focused on producing helpful guides to assist you folks at home and on the toilet at completing horrific visions, and I've been having a lot of fun doing them. A thought came to mind, and maybe I'll try running them on characters that aren't as prepared to run visions, as in like almost all of my alts. So let me know what you think of that idea, and maybe it'll be helpful, and if so, I'll start putting in some work on getting something like that out. Of course, I'm working on other projects too, so stay tuned for that. Next week is the world first race, and you might catch me bouncing between Limit and Methods broadcast, unless, of course, they infinite stars the crap out of everything and it's all over in an hour. That's about everything though, so if you haven't already, hit the like button over there. Thanks. And subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. Thanks a ton for coming, and we'll see you next week from, I guess, the other house. Woo! So until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.